Caitlin, I see what you did there. I see what you did there, and I like it. We need to start planting these seeds a little bit more throughout the Indiana Fever organization and out there into the atmosphere for the public to know. Caitlin Clark does not have to stay with the Indiana Fever. Caitlin Clark joined Aaliyah Boston and Candace Parker on their podcast, Post Moves. Great episode, by the way. And there was something that I noticed. Caitlin Clark was not committing to the Indiana Fever long term when her and Aaliyah Boston talked about Aaliyah Boston's contract. We got to get into it. Welcome.
What is up, basketball family? Welcome back to Street Hoops, the only channel on this platform that refuses to read off corporate PR sheets and absolutely refuses to sugarcoat the destruction of a dynasty before it even begins. I am your boy, Dre Fiver, and today we are skipping the fluff, skipping the mainstream media talking points, and diving headfirst into an absolute institutional crisis playing out right before our very eyes in Indianapolis. What went down on Wednesday night, and what is currently unspooling across WNBA social media, is not just a regular sports story about a player resting a tight back. If you actually open your eyes, look at the timelines, check the mandatory league paperwork, and listen to the boardroom mechanics happening behind closed doors, this looks like an absolute, premeditated corporate heist pulled on the most loyal, highest-spending fan base in women's basketball. There is a very specific, legally defined term in consumer protection law for the act of knowingly marketing a premium product, securing top-dollar payment from your consumers, and then deliberately substituting a vastly inferior version at the exact moment when the customer's ability to get a refund has completely expired. It is called bait-and-switch fraud. In any other heavily regulated industry in the world, this kind of behavior triggers immediate federal investigations, massive class action litigation from angry consumers, and executive-level firings, but on a Wednesday night in May 2026, the Indiana Fever front office, led by a brain trust that apparently thinks they are untouchable, decided that pulling a massive bait-and-switch on their own fans was just another smart, acceptable operational tool to maximize their midweek stadium revenue. We are officially conducting a full, documented, evidence-based autopsy of what is rapidly becoming the most toxic, legally questionable front office scandal of the entire 2026 WNBA season. We are not here to speculate. We are not here to guess. We are placing the Indiana Fever's own physical actions, their wildly contradictory public statements, their blatant failure to comply with mandatory league reporting requirements, and their bizarre promotional marketing tactics right next to the explicit language of the WNBA collective bargaining agreement. We are letting that massive collision speak for itself. If you have been consuming the mainstream media's version of why Caitlin Clark was suddenly missing from the lineup against the expansion Portland Fire, you have been voluntarily consuming a completely manufactured, pre-approved lie. They want you to blindly believe this was just a simple case of back management, a little precautionary rest, and responsible long-term athlete care. But we are going to completely dismantle that narrative piece by piece, brick by brick, starting with the exact league rules that this franchise is contractually obligated to follow. Let us establish the hard factual foundation before we go any further down this rabbit hole. As tip-off rapidly approached for the Fever's highly anticipated home matchup against the brand-new Portland Fire at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, a sudden last-minute announcement sent shockwaves through the arena, completely removing Caitlin Clark from the active roster. The singular economic engine of the franchise, the literal golden goose, the player whose very name naturally drives 99% of all national broadcast interest, sky-high secondary ticket pricing, and historic road game attendance surges across the entire league, was suddenly declared officially unavailable, just roughly an hour before the game started. The official story that was conveniently leaked to local media contacts referenced a sudden onset of back stiffness and tried to position the benching as a highly conservative, medically responsible coaching decision. The massive, glaring problem with that beautiful, neatly tied public relations story is that the WNBA's own collective bargaining agreement rulebook makes that explanation completely impossible to sustain under any form of basic logical scrutiny. The WNBA collective bargaining agreement contains incredibly strict, non-discretionary language regarding injury reporting obligations for all member franchises. As meticulously documented by independent analysts across basketball social media, including the highly respected and widely cited research compiled by the sports account known as Fantasy Doctor, WNBA franchises are legally and contractually required to submit their complete, updated injury, illness, and rest designations to the league office by precisely 5 p.m. local time on the calendar day preceding any scheduled game. Let me be crystal clear about this. This reporting requirement is not a polite courtesy. It is not a casual recommendation or a friendly best practices guideline. It is a contractually binding obligation, carefully designed to maintain the competitive integrity of the league, protect the booming sports betting markets, and most importantly, protect the everyday consumer base from being ripped off. The only legally permissible exception written into that specific rule covers the second night of a back-to-back game scenario, where an overnight injury might legitimately occur. But guess what? The Portland Fire game was absolutely not the second night of a back-to-back. The Indiana Fever had a totally clear empty calendar day to adequately assess their roster, evaluate their medical situation, and file the proper paperwork. So the core, fundamental question that the Indiana Fever front office must aggressively answer, not just to us, not just to the fans, but to the WNBA league office, is incredibly simple. What did your official injury report, submitted by the 5 p.m. deadline the day before the Portland game, actually say about the health status of Caitlin Clark? The answer, based on all available reporting and league documents, is an absolute, undeniable zero. Nothing. Nada. There was no medical designation, no participation warnings, and no health classifications of any kind. Clark did not magically appear anywhere on the mandatory pregame reporting documentation that the league explicitly requires franchises to submit. The real-world financial consequences of that intentional, calculated omission are absolutely devastating to everyday sports consumers. Secondary ticket marketplace prices for this specific Wednesday night game were massively inflated purely because families fully expected to see the league's biggest star. Hardworking parents across Indiana, Ohio, and neighboring Midwestern states made long-distance travel arrangements, paid for expensive downtown hotel rooms, and spent hundreds of dollars on premium arena parking and overpriced stadium food based on the completely reasonable, well-founded assumption that the marquee player would be on the floor. The massive stadium parking lots collected the revenue. The concession stands successfully sold out their expensive food inventory. The official merchandise stores rapidly processed thousands of dollars in high-margin jersey sales. The non-refundable tickets were officially scanned at the digital turnstiles. And then, only after all that cash was securely locked away in the corporate vault, did the public address system quietly announce that Clark would not be suiting up. The specific timing of that announcement was not an accident, and it was certainly not a sudden medical revelation. It is the absolute, undeniable smoking gun of this entire institutional scandal. The collective bargaining agreement's reporting timeline exists for this exact specific reason: to strictly prevent sports franchises from treating their own dedicated fans like gullible financial marks. Why would a professional sports organization willingly and knowingly accept the absolute certainty of a massive league fine rather than just easily comply with a simple reporting schedule? The mathematical corporate calculation here is completely transparent, and the Fever front office brain trust knew exactly what they were doing every step of the way. If Clark's absence had been reported transparently and honestly at 5 p.m. the previous day, per the mandatory CBA requirement, every single lucrative revenue stream for Wednesday night would have suffered an immediate, devastating, and highly visible drop. Dedicated season ticket holders would have chosen to stay home. Casual, fence-sitting fans planning to buy expensive walk-up tickets would have immediately paused their transactions. The highly volatile secondary market values would have cratered instantly. The arena's announced capacity crowd simply would not have materialized at its maximum, full revenue potential. The Indiana franchise clearly and coldly calculated that quietly paying a standard league fine for a minor reporting violation was significantly cheaper than voluntarily losing out on a sold-out stadium's worth of midweek consumer spending. That is not a nuanced basketball decision made by a coaching staff concerned about player longevity. That is a cold, calculated, deeply cynical financial move executed directly at the executive level, and it absolutely deserves to be aggressively exposed for exactly what it is. But this massive, cynical reporting violation is only one layer of the deep, suffocating darkness currently surrounding this team. Because the underlying question of why Clark was actually unavailable points directly to a deep, toxic, fundamentally broken locker room culture that the front office is desperately and clumsily trying to cover up. The viral, heavily circulated sideline footage from the game immediately preceding the Portland matchup requires absolutely no professional lip reading or advanced interpretation. It is completely visible, incredibly raw, and thoroughly documented for the whole world to see. Head coach Stephanie White and highly vocal assistant coach Brianne January were caught dead to rights on camera, engaging in an incredibly intense, uncomfortably physical, and highly emotionally charged interaction with Caitlin Clark right on the sideline during a critical timeout. In that damning footage, You can see Clark visibly and forcefully pushing away, physically disengaging from the coaching staff, and firing back with a level of pure, unadulterated anger that goes way, way beyond normal high-stress in-game coaching communication. What the broadcast cameras managed to capture was a generational, paradigm-shifting superstar who had finally reached her absolute breaking point, responding with unambiguous, hostile body language that clearly signaled a massive, irreparable structural breakdown between the franchise player and the leadership staff. In the high-stakes, billion-dollar world of professional sports, when an asset of Clark's massive commercial, cultural, and on-court value has a highly public meltdown with the coaching staff, the absolute top priority for a healthy, functioning front office is immediate de-escalation, open, honest communication, and swift institutional resolution. You sit down like adults, you thoroughly talk out the philosophical differences, and you find a cohesive, unified path forward. You absolutely do not engage in petty, childish corporate retaliation. Yet, the photographic evidence secretly leaked from the Fever's closed practice facility in the tense days immediately following that sideline explosion tells a visual story that completely and utterly shatters the official, PR-approved back injury narrative. The haunting images captured of Clark's physical positioning relative to the rest of the active roster and the coaching staff during that practice session are incredibly telling. She was completely isolated, standing deep in the far corner of the gym, thoroughly disengaged from the team drills, and structurally removed from the normal, everyday operational flow of a professional practice environment. That simply does not look like an elite athlete who is simply managing a minor physical ailment. When a professional basketball player is actively dealing with legitimate lower back tightness or general physical fatigue, they remain deeply, fundamentally integrated into the team's daily environment. They are standing directly on the baseline talking through the upcoming defensive coverages. They are working directly with the head athletic trainer on a treatment table right next to the hardwood floor, and they are actively, vocally engaged in the mental walkthrough of the playbook. What was photographically documented inside that facility looked exactly like a corporate disciplinary timeout. It looked like a petty, insecure organization intentionally banishing their best player to the proverbial principal's office to aggressively teach her a lesson about challenging authority, completely and cowardly disguised under the safe, unpunishable umbrella of medical precaution. When you logically combine the blatant, undeniable failure to submit the mandatory league injury report with the exact timeline of that explosive sideline shouting match and the eerie, undeniable practice photos of Clark standing alone in the corner, the official narrative of a standard rest day completely and embarrassingly falls apart. It simply cannot hold any weight whatsoever. The basketball result of Wednesday night's game is also being aggressively weaponized in a highly dishonest, manipulative way by mainstream commentators who refuse to actually watch the game film. The Indiana Fever ended up defeating the Portland Fire by a final score of 9-0, 7-3. Almost immediately, the traditional sports media outlets and highly biased local beat writers began pushing a deeply flawed, utterly ridiculous narrative, actively claiming that this specific game proved the Fever are actually more efficient, more ball-dominant, more cohesive, and more structurally balanced when Clark isn't on the floor soaking up the entire offensive identity. Let me give you a massive, unapologetic reality check on that ridiculous bad faith argument. Look at the actual competition on the floor. The Portland Fire is a first-year brand new expansion franchise. They are a hastily assembled group of cast-off players thrown together through a chaotic expansion draft, completely lacking defensive infrastructure, top-tier personnel depth, or the institutional film room preparation required to stop a veteran WNBA core. Winning a home game against a bottom-tier expansion squad while your best player sits aggressively on the bench doesn't magically mean your alternative lineup is superior. It simply means your opponent was completely hopelessly unequipped to expose your massive strategic flaws. If you actually sit down and watch the game footage instead of just lazily reading the final box score, the deep structural cracks are incredibly obvious. The ball movement was excruciatingly slow, the half-court sets were rigid and predictable, and the team completely lacked any form of dynamic, fast-break transition offense. Aaliyah Boston had an absolutely incredible night with 24 points and 8 rebounds, and she deserves all the credit in the world for looking like her dominant, MVP-caliber self after aggressively coming back from her own leg injury. But beating up on a helpless expansion team's interior defense doesn't solve the long-term championship puzzle of competing against elite-tested organizations like the New York Liberty or the Las Vegas Aces in a 7-game series. But the problems do not stop on the hardwood. In fact, the most terrifying issue for the Simon family ownership group is currently happening directly in the stadium seating chart. The broadcast footage of Gainbridge Fieldhouse during that win exposes an even deeper, much more existential long-term threat to this entire franchise. The actual physical energy inside the arena was completely, undeniably dead. the baseline noise floor, the organic rabid fan engagement, and the baseline electricity that has come to define Indiana Fever home games over the past 2 years were entirely absent. What the cameras showed was a building full of thousands of deeply frustrated people who had arrived fully expecting a high-octane, historic basketball showcase, and instead received a generic, slow-paced, low-energy midweek game. You absolutely cannot manufacture an authentic sports atmosphere through clever marketing campaigns, loud arena speakers, or cheap promotional t-shirt cannons. Genuine energy is generated by the solid trust relationship between a franchise and its community. When loyal fans feel like they have been intentionally deceived just to get their ticket scans at the gate, that foundational trust relationship suffers deep, potentially irreversible structural damage. You cannot heal that massive rift by pretending nothing happened, or by hiding behind tight-lipped defensive press conference deflections. It requires absolute unflinching transparency, highly public accountability, and a complete shift in organizational behavior. Right now, we are seeing absolutely none of those things from the leadership cabal in Indianapolis. And the numbers absolutely do not lie. My boy over at Keep the Vision and my brother Angry Fan Sports have been sounding the alarm on this catastrophic malpractice for weeks, and they are absolutely spot on. Shout out to Rose Rants on X for posting the official league attendance data that officially exposes what we are calling the biggest bag fumble in the history of professional sports. According to the actual, verifiable data from across the timeline, the Indiana Fever have shockingly plummeted to 5th place in WNBA average attendance. Let me repeat that so it sinks in. The team with Caitlin Clark is sitting in 5th place. They are currently trailing the brand new Golden State Valkyries, the New York Liberty, the Atlanta Dream, who are packing tiny gyms to see Angel Reese, and the Las Vegas Aces. This is a team that was effortlessly selling out every single massive arena in the country, home and away, purely off the sheer undeniable gravity of Caitlin Clark's name alone. And now, they are averaging less than 16,000 fans a night and dropping fast. The front office has absolutely completely screwed the pooch. They took the greatest financial gift in the history of women's basketball and set it on fire through pure ego and gross mismanagement. The desperation inside the Fever marketing department has reached levels of absolute comedy. Because they know the fans are furious and actively refusing to buy tickets, the organization is now resorting to the most embarrassing minor league promotional gimmicks imaginable just to put warm bodies in the seats. We are talking about an elite professional sports franchise actively giving away free pork tenderloin sandwiches to the first 1,000 fans. They are partnering with local garages to give away free oil changes. They are literally raffling off entire living room furniture sets at halftime, just to keep people from walking out of the building. This isn't the WNBA. This sounds like a desperate minor league baseball team trying to survive a Tuesday night in August. Do you really think the massive drop in attendance is an accident? Do you honestly think that the fans don't notice when the marketing department intentionally puts deep bench players like Raven Johnson, who averages literally 1 point a game while playing 5 minutes, front and center on the official promotional flyers while completely pushing Caitlin Clark? Off to the blurry side margins, the fans see exactly what is happening. The front office, led by the incredibly stubborn trio of Amber Cox, Kelly Krauskopf, and Stephanie White, seem entirely obsessed with proving they can win without catering to their superstar. They are desperately trying to force an old-school, traditional offense by running plays through veteran role players instead of handing the absolute keys to the greatest offensive engine in the sport. The fans are sending a very clear, highly expensive message directly to the owner's luxury suite. We will absolutely not support this malicious sabotage. And if you think Caitlin Clark isn't acutely aware of exactly what this front office is doing, you are completely out of your mind. Which brings us to the absolute bombshell moment of the week. Clark recently sat down with her teammate Allie A. Boston and legend Candace Parker on the Post Moves podcast. It was supposed to be a fun, lighthearted media appearance to talk about soccer angles, Taylor Swift, and team chemistry. But then the topic of contracts came up, and the entire atmosphere shifted instantly. Aaliyah Boston recently signed a massive, historic $6.3 million contract extension, locking her in with the Fever until 2029. During the podcast, Boston joyfully mentioned that she is deeply committed to the team until 2029 and told Clark how much she loves playing with her. Clark's response was a masterclass in calculated, cold-blooded leverage. Clark immediately fired back, stating plainly, "Well, I'm only signed till next year." When the hosts tried to brush it off and assume she would naturally just sign her massive Epic Supermax extension, which is exclusively available to players who make an all-NBA team on their rookie deal, Clark didn't play along. She specifically and carefully chose her words, saying, "Unless I sign my Epic." Listen to the phrasing. She didn't say, "when I sign it." She didn't say, I can't wait to sign it. She said, unless. That is not a slip of the tongue. That is a highly intelligent, intensely aware superstar intentionally dropping massive breadcrumbs into the public atmosphere. She is staring directly into the camera and letting the entire Indiana Fever organization know that she absolutely does not have to stay in that toxic environment. She is publicly holding their feet to the blazing fire. If they want to continue running the offense through role players, if they want coaches putting their hands on her during timeouts, if they want to purposely isolate her in practice and scrub her face from the marketing posters, she is perfectly willing to pack her bags, walk out the door, and take her billions of dollars in economic value somewhere else. Every single professional sports organization in the world understands exactly what it means when a franchise cornerstone publicly refuses to commit to a max extension. It means the player is actively watching. It means the player is coldly evaluating. And it means the organization has completely failed to provide sufficient evidence that the environment around her is built for her ultimate success. As my guy Angry Fan Sports pointed out, there are whispers about her teaming up with Sandy Brondello in New York, or bringing her unparalleled talents to a franchise that will actually appreciate her value instead of constantly trying to humble her. Caitlin Clark is doing exactly what she needs to do. Do not commit to them until they fully commit to you. Until this organization completely clears out the boardroom rot, fires the executives responsible for the marketing sabotage, and fully leans into building a modern, high-paced offense around her unparalleled skill set, she needs to keep that exit door wide open. The Simon family has a terrifyingly narrow operational window to fix this disaster. If they don't immediately step in and clean house, they aren't just going to lose ticket sales and merchandise revenue. They are going to go down in history as the franchise that fumbled the greatest gift the basketball gods ever handed them. That is my absolute truth on this massive organizational failure. But you already know I need to hear from the smartest basketball community on the internet. And that is you guys right down in the comments section. Do you think Caitlin Clark is actually prepared to walk away from the Indiana Fever next year if they don't fire the front office? Are the Fever actively trying to sabotage their own star player out of pure ego? And what do you think about them dropping to 5th in attendance while handing out free furniture just to fill the stadium? Drop your rawest thoughts, your deepest breakdowns, and your craziest theories below, because every single perspective in that comment section drives the conversation. If you want the most intense, completely unfiltered, legally accurate coverage of everything happening in the basketball world, make sure you absolutely obliterate that like button, destroy the subscribe button, and turn on all your notifications so you never miss a single deep dive. This is your boy, Dre Fiver, signing off from Street Hoops. Keep your eyes open, stay locked in, and I will see you all in the very next video.